Minecraft 1.20 has introduced a brand new wood type into the game, the beautiful cherry trees. So in this video, learn everything about how to find, farm, and grow this new addition to Minecraft's current wood types. If you want to find the brand new cherry tree wood type, which looks like this, having pink leaves, pink wood, and also sort of a dark purplish bark, you have to first find the cherry grove biome. Now the cherry grove biome is the only biome in the entire game that contains these cherry trees, and it is an incredibly beautiful biome with nice grass colors, water colors, and of course vegetation in it. But where exactly in the Minecraft world does this biome generate? Well, the new cherry grove biome is going to generate in many of the same places as the meadow biome does in Minecraft 1.18 and onwards. So more or less a certain percentage of meadow biomes will not generate as meadows anymore, but will generate as the cherry tree grove biome. This is actually quite similar to how Minecraft decided to introduce the mangrove swamp, with there being no additional swamp in the game, just a percentage of what would have generated as the normal swamp, then be the mangrove swamp. So for an example, this mountaintop happens to have a small patch of the cherry grove biome on it, whereas before 1.20 this would have always been meadow. Now what does this biome itself consist of? Well, the cherry grove biome is really simple because it only really contains two pieces of generation in it. The first one is of course the giant cherry trees, and these cherry trees generate exactly the same as they would from a bone mealed or just naturally grown sapling. So unlike, let's say, some biome like maybe the tall birch forest, also known as the old growth birch forest, these trees do not generate in any special way. They are exactly the same as they would be from a sapling. However, they are incredibly beautiful and of course give us this new wood type. The other nice benefit of these trees in the cherry grove biome is that the bee nests are very common here. As you can tell, there's actually bee nests all across the entire cherry grove biome, and although they're not as common as in, let's say, the actual meadow biome, they still generate quite frequently, and honestly just the colors around this biome are so beautiful. It really is one of the best new biomes added to the game, and I think this is going to be one of people's favorite new places to build houses. Also, something you get in the cherry grove biome are these. The little things on the ground, they're known as pink petals, and I believe the idea would be that these particles coming off the leaves of the cherry grove trees eventually rest on the ground to form these pink petals. However, the crazy thing is, if we actually take a really close look at this texture, there are tiny little stems for each one of these pink petals. So although they may seem to just be decaying flowers on the ground, they appear to actually be their own plants. And in terms of mob generation that you find here, of course there is those beehives, but as well as that we also have pigs and sheep. Just looking at it, this is an incredibly beautiful biome in every single way, and I'm really happy this is being added into the game. One part of this generation that is particularly unique is actually this item right down here that we can see all across the floor. That is the pink petals. So how do these work? Well, basically the pink petals only generate in one place, and that's all across the cherry grove biome, but they do not come from the leaves. What do I mean by that? Well, of course the look of these leaves is that they're dripping down petals onto the ground, and that is what I think Mojang is trying to get across by those. However, as you can see above me, I've placed down a massive roof of the cherry tree leaves, and we even have these particles going down, but none of the pink petals are making their way onto the ground. So basically those do not actually actively add the pink petals. Pink petals themselves are kind of interesting how they're placed, because they actually work quite similarly to the candle or the sea pickle. So what do I mean by that? Basically you right click on the ground once and that places down one of the pink petals, and you can keep right clicking to add more of them up to 4. So it's kind of this strange new placement system. These also do not require silk touch or shears to pick up. You can literally just pick them up with your fist. The pink petals themselves and the actual fact of this biome existing basically gives the player infinite pink dye, because of course as you can see here there's literally hundreds and hundreds of these petals in even a very small area, and they can be broken very easily, and these directly craft one pink petal into one pink dye. And so because of that you can get yourself an infinite source of fundamentally free pink dye from this awesome cherry tree grove biome. However, if for some strange reason the insane amount of these flowers that are already in the biome is not enough for you, there is one other thing you can do. Place down a single pink petal and right click on it with bone meal. As you can see, when we bone meal it, it gives us one more pink petal. However, if we bone meal it again once it's completely full, one pink petal will pop off for every single bone meal we put on there. And so you can generate a whole bunch of it this way. You could even do this with a dispenser if you wanted. For example, let's put in some bone meal into this dispenser, and you can see it's growing us tons more of those pink petals. And then of course they start popping off. However, this is not actually the most efficient way to use bone bone meal to get yourself more pink petals. The best thing to do is to go into the cherry grove biome and break away a bunch of the pink petals as well as grass. And then if you bone meal the grass in this biome here, you'll notice that though sometimes we'll just get a big tuft of grass, there's also sometimes here some pink petals. And for instance, between those two, that was 5 pink petals. And considering the fact that the normal price we're going for is 1 bone meal into 1 pink petal, by bone mealing it this way, we're multiplying our amount of pink petals by a ton. So for instance, right there, we had 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is a lot more than 1, and if we bone meal over here, there's even more. Once I've cleared the grass away, let's see what we get from only 1 piece of bone meal, and that was 17 pink petals per bone meal. This is obviously the superior method for getting yourself pink petals, and also if there's an area of this biome that doesn't have enough pink in it already, feel free to bone meal the ground to get even more. And as you can see, of course, already, there's usually so many of these pink petals, there's not much of a point of generating them. And if you're wanting to farm these, they are breakable by water, so you can get yourself a ton of these insanely quickly. And as well as that, you can also compost them. Although they don't have an insanely great compost rate, they're definitely decent, and so you can get yourself a whole ton of free bone meal out of this biome. But let's move on to the next pink thing inside of the cherry grove biome. That is actually not the beehives, but the cherry tree leaves. Now the cherry tree leaves are obviously a very interesting leaf inside of the game, because they're not green basically, but outside of that they actually work pretty standard to most other leaves. Now unlike let's say the netherwood, where the leaves of that don't really disappear unless you manually break them, thankfully with the leaves of the cherry trees they will disappear on their own. And of course they work like most other trees where you just cannot have any logs nearby them, and if there are no logs nearby, then of course those logs aren't sustaining them, and the trees can actually disappear. So if we turn up the random tick speed, you can actually see all these leaves disappearing, and as well as disappearing, they also do drop us 2 types of items. The first one is the incredibly beautiful cherry sapling. This sapling alone is an amazing addition to the game because of how beautiful it is, and it also sort of resembling a bonsai tree. But also as well as that, we do have the standard stick drop that you get from most trees in the game, and so more or less what this means is that when you're farming the cherry trees, you're going to get those nice benefits like the free saplings and the sticks that you wouldn't necessarily get from something like mangrove wood, because of course with that you have to manually grow the propagules. Now thankfully fortune also works on these, so if you want to get yourself a absolutely massive amount of sticks as well as saplings, be sure to go through this biome breaking all the leaves with a fortune hoe. However, if you think these leaves are incredibly beautiful and should be built with on their own, which I would definitely agree with you on, as these are insanely beautiful trees with such nice leaves, we can collect these with shears and place them back down. They will not decay if they are on the ground. However, of course, you can also collect these with other things if you want. So for instance, a silk touch axe will technically drop these, with the ideal tool being a silk touch hoe. And something I love about these is that they can be waterlogged. And honestly, the look between the water in this biome and the pink cherry tree leaves is super beautiful. So even though we're literally looking at just one block that's happened to be waterlogged, I really think that a big wall of these leaves also being waterlogged is a beautiful thing you could add, especially considering the fact that water will not bleed out if you're anywhere. And as well as that, these being waterlogged, they are actually entirely blast proof. And it is actually impossible to even set them on fire. You can't even right click on these for the fire to be started. Now, other than their visual appearance, here is one other thing that is unique about the cherry tree leaves over every other leaf in the game, and that's the fact of these dripping particles that come off of them. You can especially see it right here. There is a ton of these particles. I believe there is a limited number inside the entire world, so for instance, if you had an insane amount of these leaves above you, it probably would not look like it's, let's say, raining those pink particles, but still it's a very cool way of sort of showing the leaves being slowly dropped off from these blocks. As of course the idea behind these is being the cherry blossom or sakura trees, which of course at certain times in the year are covered with hundreds and hundreds of these cherry blossoms that do eventually fall off of them. This is actually one of the first times too that Minecraft has definitively given us a biome that has a season to it, with this biome obviously being the season that the cherry trees have those flowers in. As of course any other time of year, the cherry trees wouldn't be anywhere near as interesting. And these pink particles basically work the exact same as the honey particles or lava and water particles that come off of beehives and also from blocks underneath lava and water. But enough about the leaves, let's go on to the prize of this entire thing, the wood itself. So of course the actual logs are pretty common. As you can see here, there's a large number of them that are easy to grab and access. Although certain logs in here aren't the easiest to reach, there are a couple you might have to pile up a bit for. Overall, this is not an incredibly difficult tree to chop down, and is one that if you see here can even have up to 3 or 4 prongs in them, with all kinds of logs across it. Now in real life, the wood of the cherry tree is not pink like this. However, in Minecraft, I think they decided to add a pink wood type because Minecraft already has a lot of wood types with the same color as the cherry tree wood would be. Now something good to know is that it's definitely not fire resistant. In fact, unlike let's say the very colorful nether woods, being colorful is not the requirement for not being flammable. So be careful about that, especially considering the fact that these trees often touch each other. It can definitely cause crazy forest fires. Now in terms of the actual texture of this, it is very light. In fact, the lightest wood type we've ever had. And obviously it's also colored, which does change that a little bit, but let's compare this to the birchwood and see which one's lighter, as of course the birchwood has always been Minecraft's lightest colored wood. And if we place down these birch planks right next to it, they are actually darker than it. Now of course they're still a very light colored wood, but they are 100% darker than this cherry tree wood, which is honestly really crazy. Even just looking at this straight on, it is really bright, so it definitely can be used in a lot of accents. However, the log itself, which of course we can craft directly into the wood, which means that there is the bark texture on every side, this is a very unique log, and if you take a look here, it almost has a purplish texture. Incredibly dark pink or purple is how I would describe this. Almost slightly chocolatey looking in a sense. This is a truly beautiful wood type. Another great benefit of this is that the log item looks a lot different from the planks, because in certain wood types where the logs and the planks are similar, you can't really build with them together as they just don't contrast enough. However, with this, they definitely contrast enough. Although of course the exposed side is similar, we can still do some really beautiful things, like let's say making a wall out of the cherry planks, which have of course a very cotton candy pink look to them, and then we can actually outline this build with the logs, and it doesn't even look bad together at all. In fact, those look really good. This is honestly going to add a lot of awesome options for Minecraft's builders, and as well as let's say the bamboo blocks. This is again another sort of Asian type tree, and so I think it's really cool that Minecraft is adding all of these biomes and wood types from Asia, because it really does give us a bunch more opportunities in terms of building in different styles that aren't just medieval. Also sort of globalizing Minecraft's biomes. I'm hoping along with this we might eventually get some more jungle updates to make a more realistic and unique jungle biome. Here is the appearance of everything that can be crafted out of the cherry wood. Of course, to start we have these interesting trapdoors and doors. These really do have a very candy-like look to them, almost looking like they're made out of bubble gum or some sort of other candy. Of course we have the logs here and then the stripped versions of those, and the planks, and we have a full wood set here including things like gates and fence gates that can all be made out of this wood. For a bit of a darker pink look, we have the hanging sign that is made out of the cherry tree wood, whereas the standard sign is much more standard in terms of its color. And there's also the boat and the chest boat, and these boats just honestly look so funny compared to all the others in the game. Being so incredibly bright, they look like they're kind of fake. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love this wood type for sure, but that color isn't necessarily the most convincing wood color. Now we also have the leaves and the buttons and the pressure plates here, and the sapling. And speaking of the sapling, it's actually really awesome because you have the additional decorative opportunities of this absolutely beautiful cherry sapling in a pot. The potted cherry saplings I think look so good. This alone really makes this update amazing because it gives us this appearance of a bonsai tree, and the texture of it is really nice. I think overall Mojang did a great job with the textures of these blocks. And although of course they're not realistic to real life cherry trees, they are still really fun. Also, here's something really crazy. You would definitely not think of this by looking at it, but the cherry tree log is probably the darkest log in the entire game. Here are some of Minecraft's darkest logs in terms of the bark that's on them. And you can see of course here we have the spruce, then the cherry, the dark oak, of course the acacia, as well as the mangrove wood. But in terms of the look of the bark itself, we have this incredibly dark texture here, really having some darker tones in it than even this wood type. And so I think this log itself alone will just have some amazing opportunities to it, but also the stripped variation of it, having that slightly darker tone of pink that's a little bit less bright on the eyes, could also be very useful for all kinds of different builds. Because it's so beautiful, I really think my next goal is to make a candy house out of the cherry wood, because these textures are honestly incredibly beautiful. Alright, but of course for the final question, how do you farm the cherry trees? Thankfully these are really simple to farm. Now of course to get a bunch of it you could just go into one of these biomes and chop them down. That's not a very sustainable practice, and eventually this rather rare and uncommon biome will eventually all disappear. So as I said earlier, these leaves do drop the saplings really commonly, and that means we can do a giant block of this wood. Now what do I mean by that? The idea would be you place down the saplings in a pattern. I would usually say 5 by 5 or 8 by 8, something like that. We'll just do 5 by 5 here. And once every single sapling is laid out, you can just let them grow there, but ideally, you'll bone meal these one by one and let them grow into a giant grove. So just kind of go through here like this, as you can see, growing each one of these. Some of them, of course, will grow faster or slower, and because there's a lot of logs that go to the side, this is not the most efficient in terms of logs being wasted or leaves being wasted, but it is 100% the most efficient in terms of the amount of time it takes for the logs to actually be harvested. The reason for this is that once we have this entire bunch of logs grown, we don't just have to go from tree to tree to get ourselves a couple logs. We now have a massive clump of these logs all in one place, and this is only a 5x5, just 25 saplings. We go through here and there's logs absolutely everywhere we look. I love this so much because it really does take any wood type and it makes it incredibly easy to get. I mean, just right here we have ourselves a ton of stacks of this cherry wood that we had to do almost no effort for, and so of course this is always a great method for that. Additionally, once you're done, you can harvest those leaves and get yourself more saplings for the next round, or you can even just burn it down. It's really up to you, but this is 100% a good way of getting it. However, if you're not up for that method and you'd prefer something that grows more slowly, the one problem is that the cherry trees can be very large in terms of their leaf and log area towards the top, as they kind of have these sideways branches. And so because of that, to be fully safe when planting down the cherry saplings, safe of course in terms of not having the leaves bump into each other and then be deleted, which will give you less logs and leaves, although it's actually not that important, you need these to be at least 14 to 16 blocks apart, which means one sapling here, and then we literally count 16 blocks, and we place the next sapling here another 16 blocks over. The reason for this is that these can each go 8 blocks in one direction. Now of course they almost never are going to. As you can see, if we count it, this one actually did go 8 blocks over, so if this one had have also, they definitely would have touched. So keep that in mind to plant them really sparsely if you're trying to save a bunch of the leaves, but in general again they do not have a low leaf drop rate, so it's fine to plant them pretty close. And one of my favorite things to do with trees like this, where of course you chop them down and wait for them to decay, is to enlist the help of a certain mob. That is the incredibly fun Allay, which by the way has colors that definitely contrast well with this biome. Anyway, the idea would be is that you'd go around cutting down trees in your farm, or even just inside of that biome, and you could even have some of these Allays pick up the logs, but the idea would be once you're done chopping down this tree, then all the leaves are going to decay and they're going to drop saplings as well as sticks. This is when our Allays come in handy, because we don't have to sit there and wait around for those saplings and sticks to drop, or even worry about them despawning. We can just continue on farming trees wherever we are, and all those Allays are going to come over with their saplings as well as their sticks, place them in our inventory, and really make that a lot easier. And so that too is a really great trick for farming these trees, and also one that's quite fun. I'd also suggest switching out at least one Allay for having the log, so minimum 1 stick Allay, 1 log Allay, and also an Allay for the saplings. And of course, as you can see, there are nearly infinite building opportunities with this gorgeous block. Anyway, whether this wandering trader wants to or not, it's the end of the video. If you enjoyed this guide all about the new cherry tree and cherry grove biome, be sure to press the like button, subscribe for more Minecraft news, guides, tips, tutorials, and facts, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye!